Hey, this is Professor Homo. Welcome back to the section part of our CSS Dentist. This area of our page right now, and it involves, there's a picture in there which is in a figure element, and there's a fig caption, and there's paragraphs, and there's H1. It's not really that difficult, but there's a bunch of things in here. But one thing to keep in mind, these descendants, and what that means is if I look at, there's my section area, and I tried to tab this so you could see that there's inside of section, there's an H1 inside of section. And inside of section, there's a figure inside of section. So you could have H1s all over your page, but these H1s are the ones specific to section. That's why when we identify that H1, we're going to put the name ahead of it so we know it's for that one. Same thing with figure. And a couple of these, if you notice, fig caption is actually kind of 2 generations in. Section is kind of the main element, then inside of that element is figure, and then inside of that is fig caption. And also, image is also inside of figure, so that's also an element that's inside of figure. So when think of it like, files inside of folders, inside of folders, inside of folders. It's going to kind of work like that. And sometimes I'll try to tab to indicate where to find that. And if I look at my CSS, I already put these down and I copied and pasted them. I started off with my very first one. This is the main one, section ID of main. And it's a section element with an ID of main, so that's all put together. And I just put a padding around it. That's all I did for now. I didn't put a width or anything else. And then I copied and pasted all of these just to show you the descendants. So section main has an H1, section main has a P, section main has a figure, section main has figure with an image inside it, and section main has a fig caption inside a figure. Now you might say, well, why didn't you do this? Shouldn't you have put figure just so you have that whole path? No, you don't need the whole path necessarily. It's only if it would only be the fig caption inside a figure. But I only have one figure there. I don't have multiple figures, so this just means fig caption inside of there. And if that's the only one, then you don't always need this whole list. If this is the only image inside of section main, then I don't need that. But I'm going to undo that just because, who knows? I may have other images in section main, but that's the one that's specifically in figure. So that's kind of where that path goes. So you don't always need to spell out the whole path, but you would need to spell out the whole path if you have multiple ones going on. So that's what's happening here. And then we're just going to put in some properties for the H1, for the P, and I'm not going to have you watch me type them, but if you just look, we can tell what they are. This is kind of blue, and it's using a font family of like a Georgia, and it's going to be bold by default. If you notice here, we actually are going to use kind of a margin top with these paragraphs to create some space. We're also going to use a line height to spread out the type a little bit. And then this figure over here, if you notice, the image is actually going to have a border on it. And we can't put image around figure because it'll go around the whole thing. So we're going to put a border around image, little thin border, like a 1 pixel border. And this is kind of like that other file that we worked on. And I think that's pretty much it. And then we're going to have to float it to the right. It's going to have to float to the right so that everything else goes to the left of it. In its HTML in that particular section. Then we're going to have to float these two elements, but let's just focus on that first. I put a couple of properties in here, and what I did for the H1 is just the font family of Georgia, and then Cambrian, some other ones in here. The color, when I did this, I did quick edit, and I actually took the same color that I used for the background color of my nav list. So that color was listed in here if you're using brackets, so that worked out fine. So I'm using that color, and that's all I put for my H1. For my paragraphs, I put a margin top of 1em. You might say, what's 1em? 1em is basically whatever the default font size is. So the default is typically anywhere from 12 to 16. If you assume 16 pixels is the default font size, on a Windows display that you'll see, it's about that. So it's about whatever the font is. So it's going to put, if you put 12 pixels, 16 pixels, it's probably the equivalent of about 16 pixels on Windows or about 12 pixels on a Mac. Line height, this is like leading. That actually spreads out the line a little bit, and you'll see how that works. And that's all I have right now. So let me just take a quick look at it and see what happened. Now, first of all, the stuff's all down here. That's okay because we have to move it. But there's my Jeffrey J. Wiesner DDS. So that's the way it should look. Here's my text. You can see it's spread out a little bit. It has spacing, margin top on there. So that's exactly the way I want it right now. This isn't. Let's go in and fix this. I'm going to go into my fig caption. And remember, that's the one where we do text align, and we do text align center. So I'll just put that in really quickly. That should be easy. I'll make it, I think we did an italic last time too, so you could use what's called font style. You don't use font weight, use font style, and I'll use italic, and I'll put that in there, and I'll make it a little bit smaller. I'll use font size, and this time I'll use a 0.9 em. I'll make it a little smaller, and that should center it. It should put an italic in that little area. So let me take a look at that. I'll just save this and take a look at it, and that's the way it should look. Now obviously it's not centered in this little area yet, so we have to kind of fix this area, because this is centered. This is the whole fig caption, the figure area, but it's not centered yet. So this is over here, so we'll fix that. We'll take care of that. So we have to deal with the figure area. Now in the figure area, what we're going to do is we're going to put a float right on here for the figure, so that it floats to the right of all the copy. And then we'll kind of see what that looks like. I'll save it, and I'll see what that looks like right now. So that's the way I want it to. So now they're working together. Now that I float it right, it's actually keeping these together. It's centering them within that little area there. Now you see where we have this gap here? We want to put some padding to the left side here. And what we could do, you could do this either way. You could use pixels or you could use em. You could even do a margin left. And this is almost like a text wrap that we're doing here. We're going to do a margin left, and I'll do 16 pixels. Eventually we'll talk about units and how to be more consistent. But for now, if I just do that, you can see that it creates that little text wrap over here. So that's the way it works. And also this isn't lining up either. We actually want to change that a little bit. And what I'll do is I'll do the same thing I did with the paragraphs. I'll put a 1em margin top on it. I think that's what we did. And I could just copy this, and I'll put it here in figure, and I'll put it below here. The order doesn't matter, but I'll put it in here. So now you can see, now it's kind of lined up. They have the same margin top, so they're kind of lining up okay. And this is kind of the way this section should be. Actually, if I look at this, other than where it's at, this looks pretty good. So that wasn't really that hard to do, to put in these couple styles here. You just have to remember the descendants, the H1s, the Ps, the figure. Now the figure image, one other thing I'll put in here, I'll put a border, and I'll use shorthand here. And what you want to do with border for the image is basically put the thickness first. I'll just put 1 pix, and then what I'll put is solid, and for the last thing I'll put the color, and I'll just put a #000. I want it black. So you use the thickness, the type, and the color. And if I save that, and notice that's on the image itself, and preview this, I should see a little thin border around here. And just to show you, if I thought, oh well, I should put it, I'm going to cut this out. If I put it on figure, if I thought it should be on figure, where initially you might think that, you can see what it does. It'll put it around the whole thing, which I don't want. I want it just around the image. So that's why I had to put it on the image. And I'll cut this again, and I'll make sure it's just on the image. I'll get rid of the extra space here, and there's a couple extra spaces here, and I think we're okay with that part. And there's the fig caption down there. So everything I think is okay so far. What we have to do is just realign this so everything's side by side.